can art be objectively, universally bad? Yeah, it can. Yeah, it 100% can. But what makes good art good and bad art bad? Recently, my feed's been showing me videos that are talking about the objectivity or subjectivity of art. If art can be explicitly good or bad, or if it's up to interpretation. In essence, it boils down to the age-old question of authorial intent versus death of the author. And those probably ring a bell, and your high school English teacher definitely brought them up at some point when you were watching Fight Club, but you weren't paying enough attention, so I'm going to recap those for you. When creating a piece of art, be it a poem, song, film, video game, yes, video games are art, but we'll get to that. The artist always has intent behind it. I mean, I'm sure there's art that is made purely for capital gain or for the aesthetic, but ultimately, it is generally an outlet for an artist to convey an emotion, feeling, an idea, try and communicate something to you, the viewer, the reader, the audience, the listener, whatever format it takes. Shakespeare wrote Sonnet 129 because he was horny. Pollock made his drip art because he was having a schizophrenic break. Rian Johnson directed The Last Jedi to spite Star Wars fans. Naughty Dog killed off Joel in The Last of Us 2 because... why? I don't know, I haven't played The Last of Us 2, but moving forward. These days, it's pretty easy to find out the authorial intent of a piece. Go look at Twitter, and as much as that's convenient, it is also an admission of failure. By filling in the blanks through social media, you are in essence admitting that your creation is not adequately conveying its message. That being said, even a well-crafted piece of work with a very specific message can be taken by the audience and interpreted in a way that the author had never intended. Now, if that's a good or bad thing is up to you. It's pretty subjective. I think a great example of how a piece lost its meaning is how Squid Game lost its anti-capitalism and income inequality commentary by the very surface level reading that mass audiences gave it. That, alongside the sensationalization and commercialization of the series' strong iconography, the doll and the guard armor with the triangle and square and circle and all that, everyone wearing those costumes for Halloween strips that iconography of its context and gives it no intent, no power, no message. The whole Squid Game thing is a video on its own, but the context and message of Squid Game being stripped from the author's hands leads pretty well into The Death of the Author is an essay written in the late 60s by French literary critic Roland Barthes, in which he argues that contemporary literature is too tyrannically focused on the author, and that instead, when appreciating a text, the audience should separate the author's intent and background from the work. His perspective on this is that texts are essentially here and now, that regardless of what the author was intending when he wrote it, if you read it at publication or 100 years down the line, your own interpretation of it is going to be influenced by your worldviews, your emotions, your experiences, and ultimately your perspective shapes the art as much as the author's does. You might take the text for the most superficial, literal reading, as a lot of people do, and that's fine. That's up to you. Or maybe the second or third time around, you've watched this movie a lot, I guess, you see little hints, little allusions that you didn't see before, or themes that you didn't pick up on, or themes that you did pick up on, but now that you've experienced them in your own life, you have a better understanding, appreciation, or different perspective. And that ever-changing nature of the world is why Barthes argues that text is eternally here and now. Cheers to my brother's girlfriend for this vodka. Appreciate it. So, the author's dead. We've shot him, he's taken an arrow to the knee, he's out of the picture. Does that mean I can ignore Fight Club sentiment against consumerism and toxic hypermasculinity and instead use it to validate my sexist and violently testosterone-fueled views? Does it mean that Destiny has good writing now? Does it mean that Last Jedi is a good Star Wars story? Well, yeah, actually, but also no. While Barthes is right that ultimately what you take away from a piece of art is how it makes you feel, there is a wrong way to read art. If you aren't familiar with the medium, if you don't understand the rules of composition or how a director and cinematographer would frame a scene to give it certain emotion, if you don't understand the tools of the trade, you can't read it properly. If you are consuming a piece of art that is created by a competent artist that has good understanding of their medium and the tools and techniques that are used to convey a message in that format, the artist should be able to take the audience's hand and walk them down the same path that they took just by consuming that piece of art. Or in shorter, less flowery language, there is a wrong way to read art. As much as we all hated our English teacher telling us that the curtains being blue had significance, the curtains being blue had significance, but not for the reasons that you were taught. The whole joke around English teacher saying the curtains are blue because the man is sad is a valid critique of how critical analysis is taught in schools, where your teacher gives you the interpretation and says, this is what the author meant, put it in your essay next week. That's not critical analysis. Being taught the techniques that a writer would use to express that a character is sad, and then show the class how you come to the conclusion that the curtains being blue is mirroring the man being sad. That's critical analysis. So in the vein of blue being sad, let's have a look at a scene from Blade Runner, a film known for its brilliant use of light and color. Spoilers ahead, this is at the end of the movie. Skip forward to this time here. Thank you. Deckard has been sent out to hunt down this rogue replicant that is got to kill. And in their scuffle, Deckard ends up off the edge of a roof with the rogue replicant, Batty, in the winning position. And instead of turning around and killing Deckard, Batty lifts him up and saves him. And as Batty realizes that he's dying, he sits back and somberly soliloquizes about his lived experiences, his lived humanity, and his mortality. Things that throughout the movie we're told replicants can't feel, that they're just soulless automata. That build-up, that emotional build-up throughout the whole movie, the narrative being flipped, the look of a man dying and accepting his mortality, the impact that that has on us, and the combination of the color blue with all of that is why that scene is sad. It's not just the blue, it's everything in combination. In this scene, the blue is sad. In the vein of blue being sad, a scene from Her, one of my favorite movies of all time. No spoilers here, this is right at the start of the movie, so we're getting to know Theodore and we can see he's a pretty sad dude. He doesn't really talk to anyone, he plays sad music, he ignores his friends reaching out to him as he walks home. He's not a happy dude. And the environment around him is mostly blue. But is blue being used as a sad color here? Well, there's some evidence to the contrary. There are other people around him wearing blue and similar sad colors. So Are they also sad? Theodore's not wearing blue. In fact, he's in red, one of the most intense colors that's associated with passion and rage. So, well, that points that it's in the other direction, that blue isn't being used as a sad color here. If you watch the rest of the movie, there's a lot of sad scenes with no blue in them at all, except Theodore's eyes. And those scenes are bloody sad, I'll tell you that. So with all that context, you can step back and you'd be like, okay, the director here wasn't using blue as a sad color, but this is still a sad scene. This is a very simple way to say that critical analysis isn't taught that great, and that context matters. Blue isn't universally a sad color, but an artist can still convey sadness without blue. They can do it with just blue. It is down to the technique, the tools that are used to create the final product that conveys that emotion. I'm not saying every single movie should be looked at through this lens. As much as I love seeing Spider-Man get vored by Venom, those movies aren't designed to be looked at as art. I can hear you now. Josh, if Marvel movies aren't art, then what is art? In Google is going to give you a very literal definition. It's a show of skill in a creative field. But that's not the philosophical definition. It's not the function of art. What can art do? We've spoken about a few things. It can evoke an emotion. It can convey an idea. It can be used as intellectual stimulus to talk about a conversation, to bring awareness, to provide escapism from reality, which we all very desperately need. But it can also just be for the aesthetic. And I can hear those keyboards going.
But Josh, you just said that Marvel movies aren't art, but then you said art can be just for the aesthetic.
Well, okay, let me finish. The thing that separates art from non-art is art intends to evoke a critical thought. It is designed to make you think about it. And in the example of aesthetic art, things that are just a show of creative skill in that literal definition, the critical thought there is about the technique. How did this artist achieve this vision of aesthetic? In the same vein, other critical thoughts would be, how did this artist make me feel this way with the art? How did this artist make me feel happy, sad, horny, as those Twitter artists do? Many mass market movies aren't designed to be looked at through this lens, and that's okay. That's just not what we're talking about here. Wait. My channel's meant to be about video games, shit. Okay, so bringing this over to more my normal audience. Video games are art, there's no question about it. It's a less mature medium than film or fine art, but it is still a very powerful way to convey emotion, to tell stories, to connect people. And it has a lot of strength that other mediums don't in the right hands. But it's still a growing medium. We're getting there. Do I think that Smash Bros is a great game? Do I love it with my whole heart? Do I love smashing my homies? Of course. Do I think Smash Bros is art? No. I don't believe the intent behind Smash is anything other than entertainment. It's meant to be fun. There is no critical thought or moral theme to be taken away from Mario and Sora and Minecraft Steve beating the ever-loving fuck out of each other. It's still a good game though. Do I love Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice? Yeah. I did a whole video on it. Do I think that it is art? 1,000%, yes, 100%. 10 bajillion percent. Because it takes heavy themes, it presents them to the audience in a way that is engaging, not only in a normal audiovisual way that film does, but it takes the lived experience of dealing with psychosis and schizophrenia and lets the audience or player experience that for a little bit and makes them think about that lived experience. And that's something that only video games can do. And to me, that's what makes Hellblade art. I'm not going to rant on about it too much, but down below is my whole video on why Senua's Sacrifice is great, because it is one of the best games I've ever played. So now that we've answered the question of what qualifies as art, that brings us back to square one. Can art be objectively bad? In the same way that a film with awful camera work, bad performances, and a score that was ripped straight off of YouTube is probably considered bad art pretty universally. A game that has next to no gameplay, uses Unity Store assets, and has enough bugs to justify calling it an exterminator is probably bad art as well. The technical execution of the art fails to convey the message that the artist intended. Are any of these traits individually what make bad art? No. In fact, one of my favorite arty game experiences, Awkward Dimensions, is kind of just a Unity Store flip. It's janky as all hell. A lot of the ideas in that game aren't good. But there are a lot of parts of the game that really hit me, that did have a really strong impact. And so, is that good art? In my books, it succeeds at conveying the ideas that it wants to in its weird, surrealist, comedic way. And it makes me feel something. Maybe that's me going into it with my own emotions, but the game successfully stirs up those emotions, those memories, those experiences. And so I would say that is successful, good art. It might be janky and not to a lot of people's tastes, but it's not objectively bad. It succeeds at art, regardless of if it was my personal reading of the work or if it was the author's intent to stir up those emotions that Awkward Dimensions brought up in me. It doesn't really matter, does it? Because it worked. If you threw all of Pollock's work in a pile with a bunch of other abstract amateur pieces and asked the audience to figure out which ones were which, does that make all of the pieces picked out art, or none of it? The general consensus is that Pollock's work is good. So, by extension, any pieces identified as Pollock's work, regardless of if they are or not, is good art, isn't it? If it evokes as much or as little emotion as Pollock's work does, then it's good art, right? My experience with Awkward Dimensions would say, yeah, that makes it good art. The execution was good enough that you felt what the artist wanted you to feel. That makes it successful at being art. Awkward Dimensions made some experiences, some memories that I wouldn't have had walking through a gallery and watching weird clips projected on a wall, or some interesting surrealist art that I'd probably really enjoy looking at, but wouldn't evoke as much emotion. Interacting with those experiences stirred up those emotions so much more than just looking at a piece hanging on a wall. A screenshot or even a video of someone playing through Awkward Dimensions isn't going to have the same impact as you playing through it for yourself. And that's a good thing. So I think, finally, after a bit of a tangent, we can answer our question. Art can be objectively bad. But it can't be objectively good.